Good afternoon. Welcome to the WinField United Facebook Live event. My name is Mark Glady. I'm an agronomist in Western Minnesota with WinField United. I've got with me today Darrin Roberts down south in Iowa. And today we're going to be talking about why micronutrients are not optional. So thanks for tuning in. When we talk about micronutrients on the first slide, you're going to see coming up here. When we talk about micronutrients, macronutrients, what are the essential nutrients? I always like to start out with reminding our customers that there are 17 essential nutrients required to raise a crop. Carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, the things that make carbon dioxide, water, those are like the free space and bingo, right? They're just there. Our crops soak them up. Hopefully we got enough of the water part. There's plenty of CO2 in the air. The primary macros rather, every farmer knows nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium are important. The secondary macronutrients, calcium and magnesium, we naturally have a lot of those in our soils already. Not everywhere. There's a wide geography represented here today. But for the most part, a lot of us have quite a bit of calcium and magnesium. Sulfur, not a micronutrient. A lot of times we think it is because we don't put on that much sulfur, but we should. 200 bushel corn will easily use in excess of 20 units of actual sulfur in a growing season. When we actually get to the micronutrients, when I break them down by primaries and secondaries, the primary micronutrients like zinc, manganese, and boron, those are really the three most yield limiting micros that we see for a lot of our crops. Again, I'm using corn as the common denominator. The secondary micronutrients, these are the ones that $5 corn kind of brings out of the woodwork. Yeah, we still need the chloride and copper and moly and nickel, but the yield responses for the secondary micros usually aren't as consistent as what they are for the primary micronutrients. That's why when you hear WinField United talk about our Maxin lineup of micros, products like Maxin ZMB or Maxin Zinc, ZMB stands for zinc, manganese, and boron, the three that we have more consistent yield response in. That's why we talk about them a lot and why we focus on that primary micronutrient nutrition, which is the main topic of today.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about micronutrient availability. Okay, so there's a number of different things that can influence micronutrient availability. One of the things that we focus on first is addressing any soil pH issues that we have and adjusting the pH to the optimal range for the crops that we're growing. As far as micronutrient availability, the general trend is that as our soil pH increases, our availability of our micronutrients for plant uptake decreases. Got a little asterisk there for molybdenum. It's a little bit different. As our pH decreases, the iron and the aluminum in the soil tend to tie up molybdenum. But in general, there's this inverse relationship that as our pH increases, our micronutrient availability decreases. Okay. There's some other factors that can contribute to our micronutrient availability, things like soil texture, soil organic matter, temperature, moisture, even interactions with other nutrients in the soil. So a number of different things. I see we have our first question here. That's good. So Al has asked here, what pH should I lime my soil to? Okay, so that can kind of vary based on the crop that we're growing. In general, for a corn soybean rotation, if we're 6.5 in that general range, that's generally suitable for corn soybean rotation. If we have alfalfa, it generally likes it a little bit higher, 6.9 or so on the pH scale. So it varies a little bit, but in general, 6.5 for corn. Okay. So let's kind of shift and talk about the different parts of the growing season. If we're talking about initially that planting window, planting, germination, and early season emergence. One of the things that we kind of struggle with is, those planting windows tend to get pushed earlier and earlier in the year, and we're planting into cool soils where we see reduced microbial activity, reduced mineralization, and reduced availability of nutrients, and micronutrients are included with that. Okay, and so one of the things we can do in that early season planting window to help address those micronutrient needs, if we have the capability for starter fertilizers, we can easily add in micronutrients such as zinc in with that starter application. If we don't have that capability, we could look at different seed treatments for corn and soybeans. There's a number of different products on the market to help address those micronutrients through a seed treatment. Okay, so that's kind of that early season planting window. Let's kind of move on, Mark, and talk about in season. What can we do to address or assess that micronutrient status in season?
Right. So how do you know if you need a micronutrient? For one, we can take soil tests as a baseline before we plant to identify deficiencies if there are some. But even if you build soil test levels of zinc or manganese to recommended levels, how do you know your plant's actually getting that nutrition in season? One of the nice tools that WinField United has available is our NutriSolutions tool, where we can take a tissue sample in season to identify what nutrients, if any, are deficient. And I always think of the grand growth phase in corn from knee-high to the tassel stage of corn, roughly call it June 1st to July 15th in my part of the world in the upper Midwest. And that 6-week period, we're taking up 60, 70, maybe even 80% of the total nutrients, of some nutrients that crop needs for its entire life. We cannot screw up with nutrition from June 1st to July 15th. And even if we put all our nutrients, our micros out pre-plant or fall plow down prior to planting, whenever that is, taking a tissue sample at roughly the V5, just prior to knee-high stage, is a great time to identify the nutritional needs or the nutritional status of our plant, whether it's corn or soybeans or wheat or alfalfa, whatever crop we're managing, and identify if there's a deficiency or not. The nice thing about the NutriSolutions tool, if there is a deficiency, it makes a recommendation at the bottom of the slide. It will tell you, hey, I'm short of this nutrient. We recommend applying XYZ product to help overcome that deficiency. If you don't have any deficiencies, hey, A+, congratulations. You did a great job managing your nutrients that year. But if you do have a deficiency, the beauty of this tool is it allows you to gain back yield in season. Very key.
Okay, so it looks like we have a question there for you, Mark.
Oh.
There it is.
All right, so if my corn's only V3 and I want to spray my herbicide and tank mix a foliar micro with it, is it worth it spraying on such short corn? Double-edged sword. So for nutrients like zinc, we talked earlier that there's a very high demand period for zinc in the early vegetative stage. The trade-off with V3 corn is that it's so short. If we're on 30-inch rows, a lot of the spray lands on the soil and not on the leaves where it's more beneficial. So would I still tank mix V3 up micro with my V3 herbicide? If that's my only choice and I'm not going to come back in with a second application, then yes, I would. But in a perfect world, I'd rather see you come in at V5 or the V6 leaf stage when there's more leaf surface area. You'll get better coverage, better uptake, and a better yield response. All of our data that we'll see shortly for foliar micros that's done in the answer plots is done at roughly the V5 to V6 growth stage. So yes, you can do it at V3. But I'd prefer a V5 or a greater application.
Yeah. Okay, so let's move on. Talk a little bit more about the tissue sample reports. Okay, so Mark, you talked about the basic parts of a tissue sample report. Every year we take all the tissue samples that are run and we compile kind of the general results, the trend reports. These are available out on winfieldunited.com if you're interested in seeing the tissue test trends for your particular area of the country. And this is showing from last year. I grabbed the data for Iowa, V4 to V8 corn tissue sample results. You can see down there at the bottom, this is all the different nutrients that are included on the tissue sample report. I've added a line there in at 50%. And you can see early on in the season, V4 to V8, it's generally zinc, manganese, and boron. Some of these micronutrients, these key primary micronutrients that Mark talked about before, that tend to consistently show up deficient and responsive, at least for the last 4 years here. Okay, so each of these nutrients play a critical role in that plant growth and development. And so now we'd like to discuss, at least for zinc and boron, go a little bit more in depth on what exactly these particular nutrients are doing within that plant. So Mark, why don't you tell us a little bit about what zinc does?
Right, so zinc, again, the most yield limiting micronutrient for corn. very important with a lot of physiological activities in the plant, from chlorophyll or protein production, enzyme transformation or enzyme activity in the plant. When you have a severe deficiency in zinc, like the picture on the screen here, you'll get that whitish streaking or grayish or almost a bronzish color. It's usually on the upper leaves. Since zinc is not mobile in the plant is not able to pull zinc from the lower leaves. That's why you'll see the deficiencies occur on the younger, newest leaves on the top of the plant. For mobile nutrients in the plant, like nitrogen, yeah, you'll see the yellowing on the lower leaves because those leaves get shaded out, get less sunlight, and the plant will pull the nutrients from those lower leaves and move them up to the top. But for zinc and a lot of micros that are not mobile in the plant, you will see those deficiencies occur first at the top of the plant, which is a telltale sign. But a lot of micronutrient deficiencies can look similar. A lot of deficiencies show up as yellowish or light pale green colored corn. How do you really know it's a zinc versus a manganese versus something else unless you take a tissue sample to accurately identify it? Looks like we have another question come in. What are the watchouts for spraying foliar micros in season? So making sure that we got a good water conditioner in the tank. If we're spraying glyphosate with the micro, we want to make sure we got a good AMS-based water conditioner like a Class Act brand, a Class Act NG, to help soften the water, condition it, to make sure we don't have any incompatibility in the tank, to allow our micro the best chance of getting into the plant and doing some good.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about boron, a function that boron plays within the plant. So boron plays a number of critical roles. You can see a pretty long list here. Boron's involved with a number of different things in that plant growth and development. Everything from, root growth, cell wall structure, increased flowering and fruiting, photosynthase, translocation, a number of different roles that it plays. The thing that I wanted to focus on here, though, is the role that boron plays in the germination and growth of the pollen tube during pollination of corn. Okay, and so when during that pollination period, the pollen, when it contacts the silk, it germinates and forms a tube, grows a tube down through that silk to the ovule that silk is attached to, and then it fertilizes that ovule, and it eventually turns into the kernel. And so, if for whatever reason that process is interrupted and we can't fertilize that ovule, then we end up with scattergrained ears because the ovules aren't fertilized. And so in the picture on the right there, this is kind of an extreme example from a research setting, but the picture on the right shows that scattergrain that can happen when the plant is deficient in boron at the pollination time. Okay, and so what are some things that we can do to address the boron deficiency if we have identified it in the plant? Okay, and so some of those things come back to, we could address it through a granular application earlier on in the season. If we're side dressing with UAN and putting additional nitrogen on, boron is really mobile in the soil, and it would be very easy to include additional boron with that side dress application. The final way would be through a foliar application. It's a micronutrient. There's different foliar products that are very effective in being able to drive those nutrients in through the cuticle. And so that's where we're going to go here is talk a little bit more in depth on some of these foliar applications.
Yeah, so when we look at foliar applications and the data that we get from our answer plot system, which we have a couple hundred different answer plot locations where we collect close to 1 million data points every year. When you're applying a foliar micro, again, it's not what we dump in the tank, it's not what we spray per acre. What matters is how much of that micronutrient actually makes it inside the plant so it can do its job. Whether we're talking about Maxin ZMB, Maxin Zinc, or combinations of those or others, we see nice yield responses to those foliar micros, especially in situations where we have a documented deficiency of a zinc or a manganese or a boron. So as we talked earlier, making sure we apply the micros in the right field. We're not recommending blanking spraying every field every year, but when you can identify certain fields that have deficiencies, that's the beauty of the NutriSolutions tool. Hey, we can actually correct this to gain yield back in season, and Maxin micronutrients are a great way to do that. The other advantage of a Maxin branded micronutrient is that any product that's listed as a Maxin means it has a proprietary adjuvant package included in it. We call it corn-sorb technology. Corn-sorb is a humectant. Humectants delay the drying out time of a spray droplet. Once the spray droplet lands on the leaf, if that droplet dries up in warm, windy conditions, low humidity, that dry micronutrient that's left on the leaf probably isn't going to enter the plant. A corn-sorb technology, a humectant that delays that drying out time, keeps the droplet wetter longer, and gives the micronutrient a better chance to soak across that waxy cuticle to get into the plant to do its job. In the patent of Maxin technology, or the data we included in our patent, with boron, we can get a 40% increase in the amount of boron that gets into the plant with Maxin versus spraying a liquid 10% boron. Zinc, 26% more zinc when used with the Maxin technology versus spraying just a liquid ammoniated zinc. So it's not about just what we spray per acre, it's about what gets into the plant. Maxin adjuvants get more micro into the plant.
All right, so we've covered quite a bit of ground here in a very short period of time. To kind of wrap it all together here. So our main focus today is to discuss micronutrient status of the crop, the importance of some of these key micronutrients, and some of the tools that we have available to assess the need, as well as address any deficiencies that we might find. Really, it comes down to this here. You know, there's a number of different decisions that the grower has to make throughout the season in order to have a successful crop. It comes down to, you know, it's all part of a system. And you can see on the bottom left there, optimizing in-season plant nutrition and maximizing our yield potential is part of that system. And so really that's what we wanted to focus on here is that key part of the system. So we'd like to thank you for joining us this afternoon. You know, if you have additional questions, we would ask you to visit with your local WinField United rep, or you can visit winfieldunited.com. Also, you know, you can visit winfieldunited.com and sign up for our advisor newsletter to get additional information throughout the season as well. So thanks, and have a good afternoon.
Thanks for watching.